Hello, everyone. Vincent is back, and I'm here to share my story about my journey out of the Watchtower Society and how I became a follower of Christ. And as I always say, I am so excited to share my journey with as many people as possible. Well, what are we going to talk about today? Well, something I just want to say. I went to church yesterday, and I am not patting myself on the back, but uh, the sermon yesterday was about sharing our testimony, or at least part of the sermon was about that. It was about sharing our testimony with people and how that's really part of our ministry. And I never really thought of it as a ministry. When I started these videos, I was just going to share my testimony because I was excited about it. But my friend, he always called it my ministry. And I'm like, I just didn't think of it that way. And then at church, they highlighted that, yes, that is your ministry. And that's really what I've done. I have focused a lot of time, attention on sharing this testimony. And yes, I guess it is. It is my ministry. This is what God has called me to do. And it just felt really good to know that you were doing the right thing. You are doing God's will by sharing your testimony. But they also brought out how when you share your testimony, make sure you bring glory to God. Do not put yourself in the limelight. And I'm really hoping that through all of these videos, that's what I've done. I may not do it perfectly, but my purpose in sharing the testimony is to bring glory to God. In fact, that's why I even created these videos to begin with, because when I look at where I am today compared to what I was in the Watchtower, in the Watchtower, I'm just going to say it. Vincent was like Mr. Cool, in the Watchtower Society. He was doing everything. He was giving talks all over the place. He was giving talks on the circuit level. He read every Watchtower publication that ever existed for the most part. He was reading the Bible, read the Bible many times, was commenting at meetings, was giving talks day and night. People, they loved me within the congregations. I knew that, and I took advantage of that. I tried to help people. So in the Watchtower Society, it really looked like I was doing God's will. I was doing everything for God. And, when you're in the Watchtower Society, you are blinded to your sinful ways if you are keeping busy. You're so busy that you forget what a terrible person you actually are as a sinner. In fact, it's all right to use the word that we're not perfect, we're imperfect, but the society always liked to use that word as like a scapegoat. Like, yeah, I'm imperfect, but, I'm still a good person. Yes, we can be relatively good, by following God's will, but really, it's like the psalmist said, there is no one doing good. And so Vincent needed to learn once he left the Watchtower Society that he is a sinner. Vincent has bad thoughts. Vincent does bad things. Vincent is no different than anyone else. And that is what I needed to learn. And that is why I wanted to share this testimony. I wanted to express how I had everything in the Watchtower Society, and now I have nothing. Now I need God. I need Christ. And I didn't even know how to get to them. And I had such a struggle. And so today, when I share my testimony, by necessity, I have to give all glory to God. Vincent has done nothing in this journey. Everything was God directing my steps. And that becomes very clear when we get to what I say the climax of when I was discovered or found by Christ. It becomes very apparent that Vincent did not choose this path, as I always say. And even after, I became a follower of Christ, when it was official, I guess you could say, when Christ found me and brought me in, the testimony doesn't end there. And that's what they mentioned at the church as well. Your testimony doesn't end just when you become a follower of Christ. No, you continue to have God's hand in your life. And I'm really hoping I can even continue the videos even after we get to that point. The purpose of this channel really was to draw a certain type of people. I wanted to, if you're a follower of Christ today, let's say you were, and I really wanted to attract, Jehovah's Witnesses that are followers of Christ. But even if you were never a Jehovah's Witness and you stumble across this channel, you may enjoy listening to it because it really shows that there is hope for a Jehovah's Witness to become a follower of Christ. And a Christian, when they find out that you are a Jehovah's Witness, and I know this from experience, from talking to other Christians, they are so excited. They are so happy that you got out of that organization, because to many people it almost seems like an impossibility. I mean, it actually is. It's almost a miracle that you even escaped the Watchtower Society and have come to God. So that is the type of people I want to draw to this channel. Also, too, I want to especially draw people that are lost. Maybe they want God. They're desirous of God like I was, but they don't know what to do. They don't really understand God's hand in it. And perhaps these videos can help them as well. And then, of course, I have that desire deep in my heart. God knows I feel this way. I want Jehovah's Witnesses to watch these videos. I especially want people that have known me for years. I want them to watch these videos. And why is that? It's because I want them to see what has changed in my life. Did my life fall apart after I left the Watchtower Society? Because that's what they want you to think, that everyone's life just falls apart. And yes, when you first leave the Watchtower Society, it is falling apart. That's because you were in a cult. You should expect that. But then, if you are seeking God and God draws you in, not only is your life not a mess, but your life is wonderful. And I mean that in so many ways. God blesses you day and night. So that's the stuff I want to share in these series of videos when I talk about my testimony here. All right, now that I've said that, what are we going to talk about? Again, we're going to continue on in my journey. If you remember right, I actually, in my couple of videos back, I talked about how I disassociated myself from the organization. And if you remember, I kind of went back in time. I talked about this disassociation, how I sent my letter and all of that. And then after that, I just continued on in my life. And it felt good that now I was disassociated from the Watchtower Society. I didn't have to think about it. I didn't have to care about it. Now I can focus on what was important to me. And of course, you know what was important to me, because in my video, a few videos back, I talked about how I loved darkness. I loved horror. And that is all I did. I woke up thinking of horror. I went to bed thinking of horror. I was always into horror. Now, I don't know if I mentioned this, but I will say it now. Although I was into horror, I did not feel comfortable going into certain areas. You would never hear me listening to songs about, Satan and anthems to Satan and all of that. I did not want that. I was mainly curious. I liked the idea of mystery and what was beyond the curtain, so to speak. So that's why I was into that. And it brought me back to childhood and all those things. So here I am. I am into horror. Well, after my first wife left me, I continued in this horror thing, and eventually I met the woman, the most wonderful woman on the planet that I married today. And I met her online, and we met, and I knew from day one, I knew in the first week I was going to marry her. After when you're my age and you've already been married before, and you understand morals and you understand people, it's very easy to see how this person was just going to be a perfect fit. That we would be married. I knew that first day, actually. I'll be honest with you. So we did. We got married. But before we got married, we were dating. And I continued on loving my horror. Now, what was nice about this woman that I met and that I'm married to today is that, and I did not understand why this was going to be important. I didn't know where this was going to take me today, but it is so important, and you can really see God's hand in the matter. The wonderful thing about my wife was she loved Christ. She liked to go to church. Now, she couldn't always go to church at the time, but she liked going to church. She was raised, in a Christian way of life. But what was nice is that she was not part of a church. She wasn't part of a religion. She did not zealously become a member of a church and then, I meet her and now she wants to drag me to this church. It was nothing like that. What I appreciated about her so much is that I called her a simple Christian. No, I don't mean simpleton. What I mean is simple, meaning she loved Christ and she would pray to God every day. And I knew that. And that was so important to me. That was important to me as an ex-witness because at this point, when you've been raised a witness, you know what's good. You know what a good marriage should look like. You know all about morals. You don't want your mate doing things outside of the house. You want simplicity. You know what it means to have a sense of security and simplicity within your family, within the marriage. And that's what I wanted. I wanted to live a calm and quiet life. I still had those values regardless of what I was doing. And this woman I met, my wife, she could see that in me. She knew where I was coming from, that this is the kind of person I really was, even though I was doing those other things. Now, a person might think, well, isn't she a Christian? Why would she be with this guy that loves all this darkness stuff? Well, first of all, she based it on who I was as a person. Second of all, I didn't push this stuff on her. And third, let's never question God, because it's like Romans says, all things work out for the good for those that love him. And when you look at our life today, you can see my wife, how much she's benefited from meeting me. And then you look at me and you can see how if I didn't meet the person I met, I wouldn't be here today sharing this testimony. Yes, God may have had other ways, but it's clear God used her to draw me to Christ. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today as well, and I'm going to take the video to a certain point. I'm not going to continue to go on and on because I want to take it to a certain point, because if I go beyond that, the video is just going to go on and on and on and we'll be lost in thought. So I want to take it to a certain point. So anyway, that was my fiance's view of Christ. She loved Christ and she loved a calm and quiet life. And that's exactly the kind of life that I needed to live. So, but I continued in my horror. I mean, she would leave to work on a Saturday morning and I would get up with her. And, this was early on in our marriage. And I would just lay on the couch and view my horror after she left. It was just something I did for comfort. I would read books, early in the morning, horror books. Well, one day we went to a store known as Hobby Lobby. It's a store that over here in the United States, it sells decor for your home and things for hobbies and things like that. So we went there one day and she was in an aisle and she pulled out this painting, this print, and it was of Jesus. And she was in the distance and she pulled it out and she said, "No, you don't really care for this much, do you?" And I looked at it and I was like, "Well, no, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it." And there was nothing wrong with it. It wasn't this extreme, crazy image of Jesus with, light coming out of his head and all this stuff. It was a nice picture. In fact, you can find it in the, if you look at the community tab, I put a picture of that painting. And I said, okay, yeah, that looks good. And it had a spiritual expression there, as you can see when you look at that picture. And I thought, well, okay, I can deal with that. And so she said, okay. And anyway, she bought the picture and she wanted me to hang it up. And I did. And I had no problems hanging this picture. And she wanted it in a prominent spot so that when you walk into the door, the picture was right there. Okay. That picture is huge in me becoming a follower of Christ. Because, all this time, after she bought that picture and even prior to that, there was always reminders to me that I might be doing something wrong. But I used cognitive dissonance and I ignored everything. Now, the few things that I'm going to share with you, it doesn't mean that I believe something was going on. Could it be in my imagination? Yes, most likely it was, but it doesn't matter because it was still a reminder that I would just constantly ignore, um, about how I might not be doing the right thing by dwelling on this dark stuff that I was. Uh, After I started getting involved in this, I told you that I set up, I had this office, but I called it an office, but it had nothing to do with finances. It was dedicated to the darkness. It became like a little museum, and I had shelves, and I had all this occultic and urban legend type stuff, all displayed like a perfect little museum. And I used to go in there at night, turn down the light some old candles, and meditate about what's beyond the curtain, so to speak. So that's what I was doing, and I would always shut that door to that room because my wife made it clear to me that she doesn't like to go in there. Now, she didn't get upset with me or anything. She just did not go in there. She did not like the feelings she got when she went in that room. That room was always freezing, first of all, and then all that stuff in there, just looking at. In fact, there was some stuff. I'll be honest with you. I bought a poster. Uh, it was so evil looking. I even chose not to hang it up, so that I didn't want her to see it because it was pretty scary. It was pretty scary. So I hid that one in my closet for a while. I wanted to put it up, but at the same time I didn't. But anyway, the stuff that I had in there, my wife was scared of it. She did not want to go in there. Okay, so that was kind of a reminder, like, the fact, her feelings about that stuff, But I ignored it because I enjoyed it too much. I ignored how she felt about it. Okay, and she didn't make a big deal. She didn't tell me to stop doing it. So I continued on doing what I loved. All right. Well, during this time period as well, something happened to me, and I'm not this kind of person, but it did happen to me. And this was an apartment at the time. It was a smaller apartment, and there were people that lived around you, so you wouldn't think that I would feel so paranoid because I'm around people. But it got to a point where I could no longer just stand in the middle of a room when I was by myself. I always felt the need to have my back at a wall because I always felt like there was this presence behind me. Was it in my imagination? Most likely it was, but still, it was a reminder that maybe I might be doing something wrong. I mean, one day I was making coffee. I say one day, but every time I made coffee in the evening, I'd be doing my thing with the coffee maker, and then I would just get this chilling feeling that someone was behind me all the time. And I would literally have the hair on the back of my neck raised, and I would always have to look. I was always looking behind me at some point when I was doing these things. So that was a reminder, like maybe I'm doing something wrong here. But I ignored it. I didn't focus on it. I didn't think much about it. I'm like, okay, it's all in my head, is what I said to myself. Then one day, my wife and I, we went to bed, and all of a sudden, the door to my office, I had it open, and it slammed shut. I mean, it slammed so hard, it almost shook the place. That's how loud it was. Um, Now, what caused that? I told my wife, she was scared, and I said, "Oh, that's just the pressure. You know how you have one window open here and one window open here, and the pressure. Things happen, and that happens quite frequently. That a door, if it's has enough, if it's loose, perhaps on the hinges, it'll slam shut, and that's the way a lot of these apartment doors are. So it slammed shut, and I told her, "Oh, it's just the pressure in the house. So it has to do with air pressure." So I got up, I checked the windows and stuff, and no, there was no window open. Okay, but still, that doesn't mean anything, right? Something was going on. I just thought, well, it probably was pressure. But deep in my mind, I'm thinking, you know, I might be doing something wrong here. Again, it's probably all in my imagination, but it didn't matter. It was like a reminder. But I just ignored it and continued on in my Love of the darkness. Okay, so I would continue on, and and what's funny is, after I got that picture, I'll be honest with you, there were times I would look at that picture like, I miss Jesus. I would have those quick feelings like, I wish I could go. I missed him. I just missed what I had with Jesus, what I had with God. But I wouldn't dwell on it like for a long time. But I would look at that picture and do that. Also, too, when I was reading my books or I was watching my horror films or horror documentaries or whatever, I'd be enjoying it. And then I would turn to that picture and I would just think to myself, will you stop looking at me, Jesus? Just leave me alone. I'm enjoying my horror, and that's it. So those were the thoughts racing through my head. That picture became a constant reminder of God and Christ. It's like it did not allow me to love my horror as much as I wanted to. It was a constant reminder. That painting, it haunted me every day when I was enjoying my horror. Um, So I continued on in this. But the one thing about, when you don't have God in your life and you're seeking these kinds of things, it's like drugs. You need to be doing it constantly if you're going to find any type of joy in it. I mean, when I wasn't doing horror, what was I doing? I wasn't thinking of anything. It was horror or nothing. So it never really brought like complete satisfaction. But again, as long as you keep doing it, you feel you're fine. And it's one of those things you can keep doing. It's not like photography where you have to go out and find time to do it. No, I always had time for this kind of thing. So I was always trying. I filled my void, by doing this all this stuff. Okay. Well, one day I was looking at that picture. I was enjoying my horror, and I'm like, okay, God, I give up. I give up. If you're real, if you're real, God, show me a sign. I want a sign that you're real. I want you to prove yourself to me. I want to believe. And so what I did was I was sitting on my love seat there and started flipping through the channels. I went onto Netflix and I said, or I seen on Netflix, there was this documentary. It's about a pastor, and it's supposedly a true story how he became a pastor because he doubted everything about Jesus. He didn't believe in Jesus' resurrection, but through this movie, uh, he convinces himself. He proves that Jesus truly was resurrected. Now, all the details of the movie I cannot remember, but I remember just my heart was numb and I turned it on thinking, well, maybe God has an answer here. Turned it on, I watched it, and it didn't do anything for me. And so I looked at that picture and I'm like, you know something? This does nothing for me. Was the thoughts in my head. I may have even whispered it. This does nothing for me. I need more than this. This is not good enough. So I actually sat on the couch at this point. Remember, I'm still loving all these bad things. I am not like getting excited about God. And that picture was a constant reminder. I didn't even really like that picture at times because I wanted to continue on doing what I was doing. It was just too much of a reminder of what perhaps I should be doing. So I just sat there on the couch and I said a prayer to God, reveal yourself. I need more. That's what I did. And then what followed is something that really began to start me off on a spiritual path. Now, I say spiritual path because, as you will see, when things begin to take place, like I've always been saying throughout these videos, the next step was not a wow moment. I did not come to God. In fact, I went various directions with what happens next. But it was key in God coming to me when you see the whole story come together. So that we're going to take the video right to there. That's why I called it The Haunting, because I was being haunted in so many different ways during this time period. No, not